Can you please call the hearing number for the record?
This is Commission Hearing Number 48 of Wednesday, 12th February 2020, in the case of 0022 Olivia Vincent, 72 Helm Sunade, case 72 John Cruz Wilkins, and 170 Brian Anakua.
Thank you. Can you please call the next witness?
Mr. John Cruz Wilkins.
Swear that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. Is it
John Cruz Wilkins.
Yeah, but
Surname
your last
is Cruz
name,
Wilkins.
Cruz Wilkins, right?
Yes.
That's what I wanted. So thank you, Mr. Cruz Wilkins, for appearing today. Thank you for deciding to appear for part of your complaint today in open session. I think it's very important that people of Seychelles understand what people went through. So when we come to making recommendations at the end with respect to compensation, they understand why we've made that recommendation. So I'm grateful to you for appearing publicly. The Commission invites you to set out your complaint. I think we're only going to hear part of it in public session. Take your time. If you need to adjourn at any time, let us know. We're happy to accommodate you. The floor is yours. Feel free to speak in Creole.
Okay, Madam, good afternoon to you, Madam Chairperson, and to the other distinguished members of the Commission. This is, I think Charles Dickens wrote The Tale of Two Cities. This is the tale of two families, the Newlingwood family and the Cruz Wilkins family. I've given the Commission several documents dealing with both cases. And last night, or the night before, I got confirmation from Mrs. Sale, the daughter of the late Mr. David Newlingwood, that I could use documents as reference. Before, I did not have that right, and even as evidence, but maybe we'll only use it as reference. And as for the Newlingwood case, it has gone before the Land Commission. And just like ours was sent to the Land Commission. And a few weeks ago, the Land Commission has agreed for compensation, and a compensation has been reached, but they have not released the figures because I think the Land Commission, there is a bill that has to go before Parliament or something about the Land Commission. So the figures will not be released until then. But this will give you an idea of what kind of value they're putting on the land there. In 2016, Mrs. Sale came to the Seychelles to press the claim for compensation for her family, just like we were doing for the situation we found ourselves in, which is a situation of double jeopardy, because we had to sell a plot of land, PR 38 in Pralin, Grand Anse Pralin, to afford the sale in Bellom. And we found ourselves in a situation then when the government frustrated the sale with an acquisition and quashed the old sale, and therefore we could not get our land back, and it is prime tourism land, as you can see from the documents, and it houses an hotel on it, Le Relax Hotel, and so it's worth quite a sum of money. But I don't know, I've given letters to you. I don't know whether I should begin with as background with the letter of Mrs. Sale to the government in 2016. I will read it out, and I'll go to the letters that I wrote to the president, the current president of the Seychelles, Mr. Danifort, in 2017. Now, the letter of Mrs. Sales reads, "My father, David Patrick Newlingwood, born 8/4/1940 in the UK, purchased on the 1st of October 1970 plot J96 Bellom for £57,500 for a plot of 48.057 acres, registered as B28 number 3537 on the 2nd October 1970 by Mr. Marimba. He was offered compensation after the acquisition by government, but only 40 rupees for the old plot, which he refused. They tried to get him into this arrangement of willing seller and willing buyer, and he didn't go for it. My father was never compensated for this land when it was acquired by the Seychelles government. He sold 2 small plots of land to 2 French nationals. These were sold just before acquisition. And she says, I am David Newlingwood's eldest child, Philippa Sale, born Newlingwood. I have come to the Seychelles on behalf of my family to find out if I can apply for any of our land back that has not been built on and compensation for land that has been built on. We understand that many other landowners at the land acquired have now been compensated. As I live in the UK, I would like John Cruz Wilkins to be my representative. His father and mine were good friends. My father died on the 13th September 2011 after 20 years of chronic illnesses. He was not well enough to fight his claim during this period. My mother, Sheila, though, is still alive. Now, the question, why my father chose to buy in the Seychelles. My father saw an article about the Seychelles in England, that it was potentially the new holiday destination for European tourists. And this was the article I gave you a copy of the Treasure Hunt in 1970. It was a famous article. And when the airport, what happened also in the magazine, in that issue, there was an article about finance. And one important British bank, the Midlands Bank, bought 5,000 copies for all its employees. And when the airport opened a couple of years later, all these bankers and people with money came to the Seychelles, visited the Seychelles. And it was this article that Newlingwood found. And there's another article I gave you a copy of later on by the same newspaper when he was fighting for compensation in 1993, 1994. Now, to go on with the letter, my father saw an article about the Seychelles in England that it was potentially the new holiday destination for European tourists. As a respected and well-known British hotelier, my father realized there was a great potential to build a fabulous hotel overlooking the beach with an underwater restaurant, oceanarium. This would have gone out from a jetty opposite his property to the reef, and it would have been the first of its kind in the Seychelles. As the Seychelles was a British colony at the time, he felt his money and land would be safe. He applied for planning permission to build 9 houses, 25 self-catering units, a shopping center with flats and restaurant, low mid-cost housing, underwater restaurant, oceanarium, 20 villas and a marina. He got this permission from the town and country planning ordinance in 1970. And then the letter goes on. I have attached some documents to support our claim for your reference. I will skip all this. And it goes on. I have also given John Cruz Wilkins a copy of all the documentation we have, which he can give to you when he sees you. We'll be hiring my father's previous lawyer, Kiran Shah, to help us with this case. I am leaving to go back to the UK on Thursday, the 24th. And, well, this wrote this to the PS, and I was told by Patricia, the employee there, that you are very busy because of the forthcoming elections. However, if you do find some time for a meeting, we'll much appreciate it. If you can't see me this week, we have set up a meeting with Patricia in 2 weeks' time, and John Cruz Wilkins has agreed to represent me. Then the last paragraph, there's one other issue. That is, in 1980, my father offered to sell the Cruz Wilkins family 3 acres of his land, J96. The contracts were drawn up, and a week before the deal was finalized, it was quashed by the acquisition. They too will like compensation for their loss as they sold land in Praslin to afford the sale. Kind regards, Philippa Sale, née Newlingwood. Now, I will take up the part of the Cruz Wilkins family, but I will use the letter that I sent to President, His Excellency the President Danny Ford on Saturday, 11th November 2017. Further to my letter of 6 June dealing with the prospection aspect of this matter, now I'm writing to you about the other side of this matter, the land issue. And in the second paragraph, I referred to Philippa coming over to the Seychelles. And then in the third paragraph, to a concluding paragraph about us also would like to having compensation. And I will go into the third paragraph. The property, P38 in Qantas Poilin, was of almost 4 acres with 2 houses and a boat shed on it. It is prime tourism land, and after being bought, was subdivided and most of it sold. It now houses a small hotel, businesses, and a residential area. Today, PR38 will be worth around 40 million rupees. This sale of land in Pralay was carried out under a court order, and the court order was attached, given to a copy to your files, which stipulated that the money from the sale was to be used to buy 3 acres of J96 in Belom on Mai. We only sold our property so as to have the money to buy the 3 acres of J96 in order to try and save the most important part of the so-called treasure site, because my father had been involved with the treasure hunt in that area. But in the process, we lost everything, both the land in Pralay and the land in Belom. And I have copies of both plans attached. Government grabbed the land in Belom, even if the transaction had reached the point of a promesse de vente, a promise to sell. And this is under the Civil Code. I think it's clause 1589, which says that a promise to sell is equivalent between two parties, actually equivalent to an actual sale. Government grabbed the land in Belom, even if the transaction had reached the point of a promise de vente, and the whole process had been directed by a court order. The acquisition was followed by a phone call from government by a man called Trent, and then by a letter, copy attached the following day, which was the 26th of February, 1980. In view of the circumstances of the acquisition of J96, government gave 2 commitments to my mother, as she had been appointed as fiduciary of the co-owners of PR38 by the Supreme Court of Seychelles. The 2 commitments in the letter were to allow you to remain upon the remaining land as tenant, and then with the possibility of disposing of the same area to you in due course. My mother, as executrix of the estate of R.H. Cruz Wilkins, acted upon the commitments given by government. She had a meeting with the President of the Republic, Mr. Rainey. Mr. Rainey promised her that the land in question would be deposed to the heirs in due course. However, he reneged on his promise because the government only sold my mother 2/3 of an acre, being the land around and inclusive of the old bungalow in which we live. Now, in 1994, under the provisions of the new constitution, after the return of multi-party politics, the Republic of Seychelles will press a claim to the rest of the 3 acres that had not been disposed to the heirs of R.H. Cruz Wilkins. The Minister of MLUH, which was then Mr. Dolo Anesta, and his PS, both rejected the claim. It was taken to the Constitutional Court, and our lawyer was Mr. Philip Boulet, which ruled that we had no locus standi, that is, no right to be heard, from what I understand, under the provisions of the Constitution to make such an application for compensation. The appeals court in 1997 upheld the decision. We lost 17,000 rupees in legal and court fees. The 2 1/3 acres that was being claimed is today worth around 25 million rupees, or even more now. Okay. As the case was over, I was told by the then serving cabinet minister, who was friendly with me, "I hope you have learned your lesson. No one takes government to court in this country," which suggests there was something not quite right with the court decision. And from what I heard afterwards, some years later, researching legal opinion on the case, I was given to understand that government had only won the case because it had not been interpreted according to the French law of the Civil Code as it should have been. So I decided to take the claim again to MLUH, which rejected it again. But MLUH's legal advisor told me bluntly, I quote, "Between cup and lip, the government has slapped away what rightfully belonged to your family." In July this year, this was 2017, I spoke to the Director of Property Management and Policy Planning at MLUH. I was told that the claim of both families, Newling Ward and Cruz Wilkins, had been fully processed, and that they were only waiting for the go-ahead from State House to proceed with negotiations. Later, I was told that the claims were being sent to the new tribunal, that had been formed to handle such cases. Whatever the mechanism used, it would be much appreciated if government entertains the claim of the heirs of R.H. Cruz Wilkins, and in this situation restores justice in favor of our family. I wrote this letter on behalf of the rest of the heirs. I took this after I got no reply from State House. I took this case to the Ombudsman, the current Ombudsman, and after, I think about a year, 6 months to a year of negotiations with MLUH, to and fro, she finally gave up and wrote a recommendation on our behalf and the behalf of the Newlingwood family and about half a dozen other cases, and sent them to the Land Commission, and sent it to the Land Commission, and I think also to MLUH. Your investigator, he tells me, is trying to seek a copy of this recommendation from, which I understand was positive, from the Ombudsman. And I took this to the Land Commission, but our case was, we were told again, just like the courts, under their provisions, they could not hear our case. And I was given a letter to bring it to the Truth and National Reconciliation Commission, which I've done, and this is why I'm appearing before you. And like I said, in the case of the Newlingwoods, they've agreed to compensate, and compensation evaluation has been carried out. And those figures, I think your commission will be able to get from the Land Commission, and what kind of value. But I don't think it's current market value. I have a feeling it might not be current market value, it might be lower than current market value. But in this case, the Newlingwoods then will be advised by their lawyer, Kiran Shah, whether to take it to court or not, or to accept it. And of course, there are timelines I provided in the case for both the Cruz Wilkins family and Newlingwood. And this timeline was based on correspondence between Newlingwood and government, Newlingwood and the Cruz Wilkins family, and in our case also, correspondence from the courts and correspondence with Newlingwood and lawyers, etc. And the valuations from the courts and other papers. And now I've got permission to use the other documents also, which I'll be working with your investigator here. And if necessary, I've asked for, on the treasure and issue, I've asked for a closed session. And in the case of that, I will do a file, get it photocopied by your investigator, and if necessary, when I come to the next session, I will then bring all other documents that you might have missing. I thank you for hearing the case. This is basically the core of the case. And I hope that you don't tell me also that I don't have locus standi, no right to be heard, like the other bodies.
I'm just trying to find the letter from the Lands Tribunal, but I don't see it.
Today we're going to seek.
Today
the
we got
Tribunal,
the recommendation. The recommendation.
No, the letter from them saying that they didn't have jurisdiction, right? And sending him to us. I don't see that on my file. Oh, here we go. It's on this file. I've got it here. Okay.
Yeah, they're saying in the last paragraph, I refer you to the Truth Commission, as the amended allows them to pursue justice for your claim of compensation.
They don't exactly say why they have rejected it. They say, regrettably reject your claim. It may be because you were in the process of procuring the property and you didn't actually have ownership of the
We
property.
didn't have ownership, but under the law, the moment there is a
Yes,
promise to
yeah,
promise
yeah,
to sell under
yeah.
the French law,
Yeah.
it's actually your land.
Yeah.
So government, when they
Yeah.
acquired the property, that 3 acres had already
Yeah.
been excised.
Yeah.
So what government did was violate the law
Yeah.
of this country,
Yeah.
the laws of the land.
Yeah.
And in fact, if they wanted that 3 acres, they should have carried out a second acquisition. And when they sold the land, not to the heirs of Cruz Wilkins, but to my mother, 2/3 of an acre, they were selling us essentially what was our land from then on.
Yeah. So I guess it's because it wasn't registered. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
Not
but it's
that you
subject
didn't
to
have it-
registration
yeah.
under the clause, yes.
So probably because it's not wasn't registered, that's why they've sent it to us, because we can deal with the issues that you have raised, because we are more concerned with justice in the particular case. We have a lot more flexibility in relation to. So there was a promise to sell. You never gave money to the other party.
No,
Yeah.
because a week before they quashed it, they've been watching, the government was watching Newling Ward closely and the Cruz Wilkins family closely. And the moment, and they knew there'd been a survey done and everything, and the notary, Najo, had drawn up the will, and there'd been a proxy, everything was in place, and it was just about to, the property in Prada had been sold, the money the money was in the bank, and it was just about to be transferred and the sale, and then they acted. They allowed Newling Ward to sell the 2 small plots with land with houses to the 2 French nationals, and then they came in. And one of the reasons why, one of the factors, even though they said it's for community development, one of the factors was the treasure hunt, because by the civil code again, the clause dealing with the treasure in Seychelles, 50% of any treasure found belongs to the landowner, and if it's not found by and 50% to the finder, and if the finder is also the landowner, then he gets the total of 100%. And government essentially, by taking the land, put itself in a position where if any treasure had been found, they would have had 50% of it automatically. It was one of the factors why they pressed to take the property. And of course, this was prime land in Belhomme, and they built the social center on it, they built the district council, the playing field, the multi-purpose court, there's a residential area, even part, this property also housed the treasure site, which was several acres. But even the treasure site part of it was built upon. And even some important demarcations of La Bise is under people's houses now. And now we have been under current since Syria, what they've done, the demolishing of cultural areas since 2-3 years ago. Now this is considered now to be a violation of international law now, of your violation of human rights. Cultural areas destroyed like this.
From Pan-National Heritage, no?
Now it's in 1986 it was declared a protected area.
Yeah.
And it was another part was declared further in 1988. And around 2006, I think it was, the Assembly declared it an heritage area.
Because I remember we visited the place as part of the
Yes,
National
I remember
Board.
taking you around. Yes.
Yeah, at the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I prefer to speak about the treasure and all
Yeah.
that in closed session.
That's why I'm just asking, because
Yes.
you named that, that's why I'm asking.
Because there are a lot of issues with that, with this. It could be quite sensitive.
So it's not the first case we've seen where land acquisition hasn't taken account of other legal obstacles. You know, it's not the first case we've seen where a legal obstacle is disregarded in favour of an acquisition.
But then they gave the
Yeah.
promise, ma'am. They gave the
Yes,
promise,
yeah.
the letter,
Yeah.
and then we saw the president.
Yeah.
He promised
Yeah,
also,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and he said
Didn't
we said
fulfill.
to him we'll buy it from you.
Yeah,
Then.
yeah.
We'll buy it from you. Even though it legally should have been our land, we'll
Yeah.
buy it from you. And he said yes, and he reneged on his promise. And because they had an interest in the treasure site, they wanted the land.
Yeah.
And I will talk about this in private session, but then we had to go to them to get licenses to pursue the treasure hunt. Whereas my father had an agreement with the previous landowners. He had an agreement with Newling Ward on the treasure hunt. And before that, Newling Ward had bought the land from Lambert, who had been a shareholder in my father's treasure hunt. He was a farmer in Kenya. And he also, my father had an agreement with him. And before that, the land had been bought from Mrs. Bert Morel, who was the wife of one of the Savvy brothers. And Savvy, of course, the Savvy family had started the treasure hunt, Mrs. Rose Savvy, because she had found markings in Bellom in 1923 in the area. And it was the first case of massive erosion in Seychelles, which now you understand with rising sea levels and global warming, when it started in Seychelles in 1923, exactly, way back.
Oh, it's the other page. We were just looking on the 13th day of February 1966. There is a ruling by Judge Amarasinghe, which says rejects the.
It was a panel of 3 judges.
Okay, so the single judge.
One judge ruled in our favor,
and
the one judge
right.
ruled against us, and the other one only assented to it. And that was in the Constitutional Court.
Yeah.
And then we took it to Mr. Bullitt told me we have to take it to the appeals court, and we will lose again, and we did three judges again, and he said, but that was necessary because one day there might be a setup like here now today, and it was so that we can take it to this body, and then you can press a claim for compensation. So
he was
it
quite
was
a visionary.
of Mr.
Yeah,
Bullitt,
very
you see.
visionary.
So that's what I did, even though I lost the money, and we went. And in fact, Mr. Bullitt can come here and tell you all about the case. He was the legal mind for the case behind it.
I mean, we would speak to him as long as you waive your client attorney privilege so that we can have him speak. If you're willing to waive that, we can ask him for information. That would be great, But I mean, I don't see any obstacle to the case being before us at all, so we can deal with it. I mean, it's fairly clear-cut, I think, your case. Your land case is fairly clear-cut.
And I put all the documents in sequence and supporting evidence.
Which we love, right?
I try to do it like a file going to court or whatever.
It's it's really very helpful to have it like this. It really makes it so much easier for us. So thank you very much for putting it together like that. We don't have any further questions for you, I believe, unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
No? Nothing except that if when I give the documents and if there's anything you want to know further, then in the next session we can, or we can even have 3 sessions. I don't know. It's up to you. What you need. I can come again for the land, and if necessary, then for the closed session, or before appear publicly for the land, and then in closed session for the treasure.
You don't live here, am I right?
I live in Bellom. I've been
you live in Bellom.
I've been involved with the treasure hunt too.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Well, then we can schedule in for the other section, right? And we will go from there. But we will do some follow up on what you've given us, and maybe try and find out why an initial promise was not implemented. But if we can get access to the file, and maybe we'll speak to Mr. Lablache. He seems to know everything about everything. Mr. Lablache is
the man in the ministry.
Yes, we'll speak to him and try and get to the bottom of it.
He's also the man, the ministry's representative on the Land Commission.
We
It's
call
got a
him
fit.
often. Thank you very much, and thank you for doing that in public session. We really appreciate it. And we will see you soon, I think, right, Alex? You find a spot for the treasure aspect of the complaint. I think we can adjourn. We can adjourn, and we will be back at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the members of the commission.
All rise.